Imagine a life where you're no longer weighed down by the habit of judging others, where your mind is at peace, and your heart is open to kindness and understanding. Sounds liberating, doesn't it? In today's journey, we'll dive into the timeless wisdom of the Buddha to uncover why focusing on others' flaws holds us back and how self-reflection can unlock true growth. Stay with us until the end because the insights we're about to share have the power to completely transform not only how you see others but also how you see yourself. Trust me, this is a lesson you don't want to miss. But before we dive into the principles, let me share a meaningful story. Once, there was a young man named Daniel who lived in a bustling city, surrounded by countless distractions and noise. Despite having a stable job, supportive friends, and a seemingly good life, he constantly felt a void within himself. Daniel had a peculiar habit. He spent much of his time scrutinizing others. Whether it was at work, on the subway, or scrolling through social media, he couldn't help but notice the flaws in everyone around him. His coworker was too lazy, his neighbor too nosy, and his childhood friend too self-centered. Daniel believed that if people could just fix their faults, the world would be a much better place. One day, Daniel stumbled upon an old book while cleaning out his late grandfather's attic. The book was worn, its pages yellowed with time, but the title caught his attention, Reflections of the Self. Intrigued, he began flipping through its pages and found a passage that would change his life forever. It read, "When you point one finger at others, 3 fingers point back at you. The faults you see in others are often a reflection of what lies within yourself." Daniel laughed at the idea. How could my neighbor's nosiness reflect on me? He thought. But the more he read, the more he realized that he had never truly examined his own actions or thoughts. He was so busy finding faults in others that he had ignored the possibility that he might be flawed too. This realization didn't come easily. At first, Daniel felt defensive. He justified his judgments, thinking, "I'm just being observant. Isn't it important to notice when others are wrong?" But the book went deeper, explaining how habitual fault-finding creates a negative mental pattern that blinds us to our own shortcomings. It shared stories of individuals who overcame this tendency by practicing self-awareness and compassion. Inspired but skeptical, Daniel decided to put these teachings to the test. He committed to spending 1 week without criticizing anyone, neither aloud nor in his thoughts. Instead, he would focus on his own actions and see what changes might occur. The first day was a disaster. Daniel caught himself judging others dozens of times before noon. He criticized his coworker's tardiness, a stranger's choice of clothing, and even the way a barista made his coffee. But instead of letting the habit continue, he paused each time and asked himself, "Why does this bother me? Is it really about them? Or is it about me?" To his surprise, he discovered that many of his judgments stemmed from his own insecurities. For example, his irritation with his coworker's tardiness wasn't about punctuality, it was about his own fear of being seen as unreliable. Slowly, Daniel began to see the wisdom in the book's teachings. By the end of the week, Daniel noticed a profound shift. The less he focused on others' faults, the more peace he felt within himself. He realized that no one, including himself, was perfect, and that was okay. This journey of self-reflection not only improved his relationships but also helped him find the sense of inner fulfillment that had long eluded him. Daniel's story illustrates a universal truth: the act of judging others often reveals more about ourselves than we realize. It's a mental pattern that can be changed with awareness, discipline, and compassion. This is where the teachings of the Buddha offer profound guidance, urging us to shift our focus inward and transform our perception of others and ourselves. Now that we've set the stage with Daniel's story, let's dive deeper into why this habit of fault-finding is so pervasive and how we can break free from it to lead more fulfilling lives. Number 1. The habit of fault-finding. The habit of fault-finding is deeply ingrained in human nature. It's often said that criticizing others comes naturally because it serves as a form of self-defense for the ego. When we focus on others' shortcomings, we subconsciously distract ourselves from our own imperfections. This tendency can be traced back to our upbringing and societal influences, where comparisons and judgments are often emphasized. For example, from a young age, children are sometimes encouraged to compete with their peers, whether in academics, sports, or other areas. Over time, this competition fosters the mindset of scrutiny both of oneself and others. However, while self-scrutiny can be constructive, finding faults in others often becomes an easy escape from dealing with our own challenges. The Buddha addressed this human tendency in Dhammapada, verse 50, "Do not find faults in others. Focus on your own deeds, both good and bad." This teaching highlights a profound truth: the energy we spend critiquing others is better directed inward. When we look outward, pointing fingers at others, we fail to recognize the three fingers pointing back at ourselves. It's far easier to judge someone else's behavior because it doesn't require self-reflection or vulnerability. Criticizing others feels safe. It keeps us at arm's length from our own flaws. Yet, as the Buddha's teaching suggests, true growth comes from introspection, examining our actions, intentions, and even the unspoken thoughts that shape our behavior. One of the reasons fault-finding is so common lies in its psychological underpinnings. The human brain is wired to detect patterns and anomalies. This evolutionary trait helped our ancestors survive by identifying threats or irregularities in their environment. Unfortunately, this same mechanism often leads us to focus on what's wrong or different about other people. For example, when someone acts in a way that deviates from our expectations, our minds instinctively latch onto their behavior, labeling it as a mistake or flaw. This habit becomes even more pronounced in a society that places a high value on perfection and success. When we measure ourselves and others against these unrealistic standards, criticism becomes almost automatic. The concept of human error is central to understanding this habit. Every person, no matter how skilled or well-intentioned, is prone to mistakes. This is an intrinsic part of life and the human condition. Yet, we often forget this truth when observing others. Instead of seeing their errors as natural or forgivable, we judge them harshly. Consider a situation where a coworker misses a deadline. It's easy to label them as irresponsible or incompetent without considering the circumstances. Perhaps they were overwhelmed with personal issues or struggling with mental health. Recognizing the inevitability of human error can help us replace judgment with empathy. To illustrate, let's imagine a scenario from daily life. Picture a mother in a grocery store, struggling to calm her crying child. It's common for bystanders to judge her, thinking she can't control her own child. However, what they don't see is that the mother might have been up all night caring for a sick baby, or perhaps she's dealing with financial stress. These unseen factors remind us that no one's life is perfect and that our quick judgments often lack context. The Buddha's teaching invites us to pause in moments like these and turn the mirror inward. Instead of asking, "Why is she like this?" we might ask, "Why do I feel the need to judge her?" Fault-finding also stems from an inherent discomfort with vulnerability. Acknowledging our own mistakes requires courage and humility. It forces us to confront parts of ourselves that we might not like. In contrast, pointing out someone else's faults allows us to feel superior, even if momentarily. This superiority acts as a shield, protecting us from the discomfort of self-awareness. But as the Buddha taught, this sense of superiority is fleeting and ultimately unfulfilling. True peace and happiness come from understanding and accepting our shared humanity. Moreover, fault-finding is often a projection of our inner struggles. The flaws we notice in others are frequently the same flaws we dislike in ourselves. For instance, if you find yourself irritated by someone's lack of punctuality, it might be because you value punctuality so highly that you judge yourself harshly whenever you're late. This projection creates a vicious cycle. The more we criticize others, the more we reinforce our insecurities. Breaking this cycle requires mindfulness, a practice of observing our thoughts without judgment and questioning the motives behind them. Understanding the concept of human error can help us develop this mindfulness. Instead of viewing mistakes as failures, we can see them as opportunities for growth. This perspective aligns with the Buddhist teaching to focus on our deeds, both good and bad. By acknowledging our own imperfections, we become more compassionate toward others. Imagine how different our relationships would be if, instead of criticizing a friend for canceling plans, we said, "I understand. Let's reschedule when you're feeling better." Such an approach not only strengthens bonds but also fosters mutual understanding and respect. Number 2, the illusion of perfection. The concept of perfection is one of the greatest illusions that humanity clings to, often without realizing it. No one is perfect, yet we live in a society that continually projects the idea that perfection is attainable. From social media filters to the endless pursuit of accolades and achievements, perfection is dangled before us as a goal to strive for. But in reality, every individual carries a unique set of flaws, limitations, and imperfections. These aren't weaknesses, they are part of what makes us human. The Buddha's teachings remind us that recognizing and accepting this truth is essential for personal growth and for fostering empathy toward others. One of the reasons we find it difficult to accept others' flaws is that we often hold them to standards that are not only unreasonable but also based on our personal preferences and values. For example, if you are a highly organized person, you might find it frustrating to work with someone who thrives in a more spontaneous, unstructured environment. You might label them as messy or disorganized, failing to realize that their way of working may be just as valid as yours. It's simply different. Expecting others to conform to our own behaviors, habits, or thought processes is futile because no two individuals are the same. Our unique experiences, upbringing, and personalities shape us into distinct individuals, and trying to impose uniformity not only creates conflict but also diminishes the richness of human diversity. This futility becomes even more apparent when we consider how much effort we put into trying to fix others. Have you ever found yourself thinking, if only they acted more like me, everything would be better? This mindset is not only unrealistic but also unfair. It places an undue burden on others to meet expectations that they may not even be aware of, let alone capable of fulfilling. Moreover, it creates a cycle of frustration for you because the more you try to mold others into your ideal version of them, the more they resist. The truth is, people are not meant to be replicas of one another. Each person brings a unique perspective, skill set, and way of being into the world, and it is this diversity that makes life vibrant and meaningful. The beauty of imperfection lies in the differences that make each of us unique. Imagine a world where everyone thought, acted, and behaved exactly the same. While it might eliminate some sources of conflict, it would also strip life of its creativity, innovation, and joy. Differences challenge us to grow, to expand our understanding, and to see the world from new angles. For instance, consider the dynamic between two close friends who are opposites in many ways. One is practical and methodical, while the other is imaginative and impulsive. While their differences may sometimes lead to disagreements, they also complement each other, allowing them to approach challenges with a broader perspective and to learn from one another. This same principle applies to society as a whole. Cultural, philosophical, and even personal differences enrich our collective human experience. In art, imperfection is often celebrated. The rough edges of a hand-thrown clay pot or the asymmetry of a handmade quilt add character and tell a story. Similarly, in relationships, it is often the quirks and idiosyncrasies of our loved ones that endear them to us. These imperfections are not flaws to be corrected, they are traits to be appreciated. The illusion of perfection often stems from a fear of vulnerability. Admitting that we are flawed can feel like exposing a weakness, and it is much easier to focus on the perceived flaws of others than to confront our own. However, the Buddha's teachings encourage us to embrace imperfection as a natural and inevitable part of life. By letting go of the expectation that we or anyone else must be perfect, we create space for acceptance and compassion. When we accept ourselves as we are, flaws and all, we become more capable of accepting others in the same way. For example, think about how you react when someone makes a mistake. If you expect perfection, your response might be anger, disappointment, or frustration. But if you approach the situation with the understanding that mistakes are part of being human, your response is more likely to be patient and constructive. Instead of focusing on the error, you can focus on how to move forward. This shift in perspective not only reduces conflict but also strengthens relationships. One of the most liberating realizations we can have is that imperfection is not something to be feared or avoided, it is something to be celebrated. It is through our flaws that we learn, grow, and connect with one another. The Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, is a perfect metaphor for this. Rather than hiding the cracks, kintsugi highlights them, transforming the broken piece into something even more beautiful than it was before. Similarly, our imperfections are not meant to be hidden or fixed, they are opportunities for growth and transformation. Expecting perfection from ourselves or others not only sets us up for disappointment but also prevents us from fully appreciating the richness of life. Instead of striving for perfection, we can strive for authenticity. Authenticity allows us to show up as our true selves, without the pressure of trying to fit into an unrealistic mold. It also allows us to see others as they truly are, not as who we think they should be. This shift in mindset can be profoundly freeing, both for ourselves and for those around us. To illustrate this point, consider the story of a teacher who gave her students an assignment to create a piece of artwork. One student, frustrated by his inability to draw a perfect circle, crumpled up his paper in anger. The teacher, noticing his distress, picked up the crumpled paper and smoothed it out. "This is perfect," she said. The student was confused until she explained, "Your frustration and effort are part of the process. This crumpled paper tells the story of your journey, and that is far more meaningful than a perfect circle." The student learned that imperfection is not a failure but a reflection of the beauty and complexity of the human experience. Number 3. Understanding others' struggles. Everyone, regardless of their external appearance or circumstances, is battling challenges in their own way. This struggle is not always visible, nor is it often shared openly, but it is ever present. Acknowledging this truth allows us to break down barriers of misunderstanding and cultivate deeper connections with others. The Buddha's teachings emphasize this perspective, reminding us that suffering is a shared human condition, and through this recognition, we can foster compassion and empathy. Life often appears to be unfairly distributed when we look only at the surface. Some people seem to glide through life effortlessly, while others are visibly weighed down by hardships. However, this perception is misleading. External success, wealth, or happiness does not exempt anyone from pain or struggle. The nature of human life is inherently marked by what the Buddha referred to as dukkha, a term often translated as suffering but more accurately described as dissatisfaction, unease, or the inability to sustain lasting happiness. This concept of dukkha applies universally, transcending social status, culture, or personal achievements. Whether it's the loss of a loved one, the fear of failure, or the inner turmoil of self-doubt, every person carries burdens that are not always apparent. The failure to recognize this shared human condition often leads to judgment. For example, when we see someone acting impatiently or rudely, our initial reaction might be to label them as inconsiderate or unkind. Yet, if we pause and consider what might be happening in their life, our perspective can change. Perhaps they are dealing with a sick family member, financial stress, or emotional pain. This shift in thought does not excuse poor behavior but instead encourages understanding. Recognizing that everyone has their struggles reminds us that no one is immune to life's challenges, and this realization can help us respond with empathy rather than criticism. Empathy is not a natural instinct for everyone. It requires conscious effort and practice. One of the first steps in cultivating empathy is to remind ourselves that our knowledge of another person's life is always incomplete. Social media, casual interactions, or even close relationships only provide a snapshot of someone's reality. People often present their best selves to the world, hiding their vulnerabilities and pain. This curated version of their lives can create an illusion that others have it easier or are less burdened than we are. However, the truth is that everyone faces struggles we cannot see. Recognizing this disparity between appearance and reality can be the foundation for building empathy. Take, for example, the story of a man rushing through a crowded subway, bumping into others and drawing angry glances from fellow commuters. Many would assume he's simply rude or self-centered. However, if you learned that he was rushing to get to the hospital where his child was critically ill, your perception would immediately shift. What once seemed like inconsiderate behavior would now evoke sympathy and understanding. This example underscores the importance of withholding judgment until we understand the full context of someone's actions. More importantly, it highlights the value of extending compassion even when we don't have all the details. The shared human condition of suffering is not limited to individuals, it extends to broader societal and cultural dynamics. Entire communities and populations face collective struggles, from economic inequality and systemic discrimination to natural disasters and global crises. Recognizing these larger contexts can deepen our empathy and inspire us to contribute positively to the lives of others. For instance, when we see a homeless person on the street, it's easy to make assumptions about their choices or character. However, considering the systemic factors that contribute to homelessness such as lack of affordable housing, mental health challenges, or generational poverty can shift our perspective from judgment to compassion. The Buddha's teachings encourage us to see the interconnectedness of all beings. This perspective helps us understand that our actions and attitudes toward others have a ripple effect. By cultivating empathy, we not only improve our relationships but also contribute to a more compassionate and understanding society. This interconnectedness also reminds us that we, too, are not exempt from suffering. Recognizing our own struggles can be a gateway to understanding others. When we reflect on our moments of pain, insecurity, or loss, we realize how much we value kindness and support from others during those times. This realization can motivate us to extend the same kindness and support to others. One practical way to cultivate empathy is through active listening. When someone shares their struggles, our instinct might be to offer advice or relate it to our own experiences. While these responses come from a place of good intention, they can sometimes overshadow the other person's need to feel heard and understood. Active listening involves giving our full attention, asking open-ended questions, and validating their feelings without rushing to fix the problem. This simple yet powerful practice can make a significant difference in how others feel supported and understood. Another way to deepen our understanding of others' struggles is by practicing mindfulness. Mindfulness allows us to observe our thoughts and reactions without judgment, creating space to respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively. For instance, When we feel irritated by someone's behavior, mindfulness can help us pause and consider what might be influencing their actions. This pause creates an opportunity to choose empathy over frustration. Mindfulness also helps us recognize our own triggers and biases, enabling us to approach others with a clearer and more open mind. Empathy is not just about understanding others, it's also about taking action. Small acts of kindness such as offering a smile, lending a helping hand, or simply being present can have a profound impact on someone who is struggling. These actions may seem insignificant, but they remind others that they are not alone in their challenges. Moreover, practicing kindness not only benefits others but also enhances our own well-being. Studies have shown that acts of compassion release oxytocin, a hormone that promotes feelings of happiness and connection. Number 4. How to help without hurting. Helping others improve without causing harm is an art that requires mindfulness, tact, and compassion. Too often, well-intentioned efforts to correct someone's mistakes can lead to embarrassment, defensiveness, or even resentment if approached poorly. However, when done thoughtfully, offering constructive feedback can become an opportunity to build trust, foster growth, and deepen relationships. One of the most effective strategies for doing this is to focus on positive reinforcement before addressing areas for improvement. By acknowledging someone's strengths and efforts first, we create a foundation of trust and openness that makes them more receptive to feedback. The idea of praising before correcting is rooted in the psychology of human behavior. When people feel appreciated for their strengths, they are more likely to trust the person offering feedback and less likely to feel attacked. Highlighting what someone has done well provides a sense of accomplishment and reassurance, softening the potential sting of constructive criticism. For instance, consider a manager giving feedback to an employee who submitted a project with several errors. Instead of immediately pointing out the mistakes, the manager might begin by saying, "I really appreciate the effort you put into this report. The structure is clear, and your analysis is strong." This acknowledgement sets a positive tone and establishes that the manager values the employee's work. Only after this initial praise should the manager address the areas for improvement, perhaps by saying, "There are a few details that could be refined to make this even stronger. Let's go over them together." The importance of avoiding public criticism cannot be overstated. Publicly pointing out someone's mistakes often leads to embarrassment and defensiveness, which can hinder growth and damage relationships. No one likes to feel exposed or shamed in front of others, and this approach often results in resistance rather than receptiveness. When feedback is delivered in private, it creates a safe space for honest communication. The individual receiving the feedback is more likely to listen, reflect, and take the necessary steps to improve without feeling the need to defend themselves. Privacy also conveys respect, showing that the person offering feedback values the dignity and feelings of the individual they are trying to help. Consider an example from a classroom setting. A teacher notices that a student has consistently been submitting assignments late. Calling the student out in front of their peers might make them feel humiliated, possibly leading to disengagement or resentment. Instead, the teacher could approach the student privately and say, "I've noticed that you've been submitting your assignments late. I want to understand if there's anything that might be causing this. Let's work together to find a solution." This approach not only addresses the issue but also demonstrates empathy and a willingness to collaborate, which can motivate the student to improve. Another critical aspect of helping without hurting is reframing mistakes as opportunities for mutual growth. When we view errors as part of the learning process rather than as failures, we create an environment where people feel safe to take risks and learn from their experiences. This mindset shift is especially important in leadership roles, where the ability to inspire growth in others is essential. For example, a team leader might say, "I see that this approach didn't work out as planned, but that's okay. What can we learn from this? How can we adjust our strategy moving forward? This perspective encourages accountability while fostering a culture of learning and innovation. The way feedback is delivered also plays a crucial role in its effectiveness. Tone, language, and body language all contribute to how feedback is received. A gentle, supportive tone conveys that the feedback is coming from a place of care and genuine interest in the other person's development. On the other hand, a harsh or dismissive tone can make the recipient feel criticized rather than supported. For example, instead of saying, "This is wrong, and you need to fix it," a more constructive approach might be, "This section could be improved by adding more details. I think it would make your work even better." A practical example of how to help without hurting can be seen in a story of a teacher correcting a student's mistake in a way that built confidence rather than discouraging them. Imagine a student who mispronounces a word during a class presentation. The teacher, instead of correcting them outright, says, "Your presentation is very engaging, and you've explained your points clearly. There's one word you used that could be pronounced a bit differently. Let's practice it together so it's perfect next time." This method not only addresses the mistake but also reinforces the student's strengths and encourages them to continue improving without fear of judgment. The principle of highlighting strengths before addressing weaknesses can also be applied in personal relationships. When giving feedback to a friend, partner, or family member, it's important to start by expressing appreciation for their efforts or qualities. For instance, if a friend often interrupts during conversations, you might say, "I really enjoy talking with you because you're so passionate and insightful. Sometimes, though, I feel like I don't get to finish my thoughts. It would mean a lot to me if we could work on that together." This approach frames the feedback in a way that strengthens the relationship rather than creating conflict. Helping others improve without hurting them requires a combination of empathy, tact, and patience. It's about recognizing that everyone has their own insecurities and vulnerabilities, and approaching feedback with sensitivity and care. By praising before correcting, avoiding public criticism, and viewing mistakes as opportunities for growth, we can foster an environment where people feel supported and motivated to become their best selves. This not only benefits the individual receiving the feedback but also strengthens the bond between the giver and the receiver, creating a foundation of trust and mutual respect. Thank you for being part of this journey with Buddha's Odyssey. Remember, the path to true peace begins within. By letting go of judgment and focusing on self-reflection, you unlock the power to transform not only your life but also the lives of those around you. So, take this wisdom and make it your own. Start small, practice empathy, show kindness, and work on being the best version of yourself. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself, share it with someone who might need it. And don't forget to subscribe to Buddha's Odyssey for more profound lessons and insights to guide you on your path to mindfulness and self-discovery. Hit the like button if this inspired you, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Together, let's create a world filled with understanding and compassion. Nam Buddhaya, and see you in the next video.